Immigration is easily the biggest issue that the Western world faces in the 21st century. It's tantamount with the Industrial Revolution in terms of its scale and impact. Because of this, the Western world, especially Europe, now finds itself at a crossroads. One way is to maintain our historic traditions and way of life, and the other way is to see it be completely destroyed forever. This is why the powers that be play down the immigration conversation and make out that people who are concerned by it are evil and stupid and racist. They don't want us to know that this is a deliberate policy which has been forced upon us by an economic elite who are only motivated by greed, as well as a left-wing liberal utopian worldview which is completely destructive and divorced from reality. They prefer us to think that the demographic change that we're witnessing is just one of those quirks of history. Why would you have a problem with it, you racist? However, people are starting to notice. In the UK, we've had 1% added to our population in the last year, for instance. But as well as noticing the sheer numbers coming into the UK, into Europe, into the Western world, the people are also noticing another thing. We don't actually have a say as to whether we want it or not. Every time we say we don't, we get it anyway. Put simply, the bigger the country you are, the more you'll be ignored. Recent data showed that the UK and Germany especially have the highest number of illegal immigrants. You may have noticed, by the way, that this graph refers to them as irregular migrants. That's another twist of language coming from the left wing, so they can control the narrative on the broader conversation. Now, European nations have been famous for hiding any data, not even reporting on any data with regards to the contribution of migrants coming here. However, this is from Denmark. This states that immigrants coming from the Middle East and North Africa are actually not really contributing at all. They're taking more out. This is why more and more people are saying, why are we pursuing this course of action? The only reason to be pro-mass migration at this point is to prove yourself as some good, moral, kind and tolerant leftist. It's becoming increasingly obvious, however, that people that hold to these points of views don't do so because diversity is our strength and so on. They do so because it's the acceptable opinion of the pseudo-religion of globalist liberalism. However, there's a big problem for the liberal regime, and that's that Western people, after being told for decades that they're uniquely evil and oppressive, are seeing that people from other parts of the world aren't quite as into the tolerance and inclusion and love as we were once told they were. For instance, in the US, you hear a lot about how America is racist because they're tired of South Americans coming through their southern border. But lo and behold, it turns out the Mexicans do exactly the same thing on their own southern border. You see this replicated in the UK, where we're told that we're uniquely evil and racist to groups like Pakistanis for not being tolerant and welcoming even more of them. But then it turns out that Pakistan itself is more than happy to deport over 1 million Afghan immigrants. Funny that, isn't it? I thought diversity was our strength and Islam's a religion of peace. What I'm getting at here is that accusations of being racist and hateful is just the technique our economic and political elite use to keep everybody in line and not question their own policies. But again, increasingly, this isn't working. Recently, there was a debate between Matt Goodwin, he's been very brave actually to leave the comfort of the leftist academic world and question immigration, and leftist Ash Sarkar. The debate was rooted around whether the UK needs migration for future prosperity. The results at the end of it, 88% in favour of Matthew Goodwin. But whenever the public do get a say, these are the results you tend to get. Remember this classic?
An online vote today. So here is the result. Is multiculturalism working? Here is what you told us. 5% of those of you who voted said yes, it is. 95% of those of you who voted this morning said no, it isn't.
Oh, I bet that one had to smart at BBC HQ that morning. Yet if there is mass public will to limit mass immigration, maybe even re-engage in repatriation, as well as end the project of state multiculturalism, why don't we do it? Well, the answer to that is quite simple. It's because we're ruled by an economic and political elite that wants mass migration for its own financial and ideological reasons. This is why patriots such as this truck driver who's just doing right by his country after catching 2 illegal stowaways got fined £12,000 for his troubles. We see madness such as this because the globalist elite are more than happy to use leftist woke ideology in order to undermine the sovereignty of nations and even continents. Things such as homeland, identity, belonging, being a people, these don't matter at all to such people. All they're fussed about is their bottom line, and they will demonize anybody who thinks differently to them, even though it's completely normal and consistent with history. However, we must realise that change isn't going to come from the next leader of the Tory party or Nigel Farage. Change is going to come from the grassroots when the people say enough is enough. That's why I believe we should have a union of Europeans who think alike. I believe we need to band together because the globalist liberals have total economic, political and media control. However, the one thing they don't have is the hearts and souls of the people themselves who wish for Europe to retain its European character. That's not because they're hateful. The vast majority feel this way because they love their countries, they love their continent, they love their culture, they love their ancestors, and they love their descendants. And they'd like their descendants to enjoy the same way of life and culture that they've enjoyed. I truly believe that once that message is expressed all the more clearly, without hatred, without anger towards any other group, leading politicians will start to jump on the bandwagon. One thing is for sure though, if a positive future is to come, it will mean a turn away from talk of GDP figures being the centre of the universe towards questions of soul and a sense of meaning. Fundamentally, I believe the Europeans deserve to be asked whether they wish to be a minority in their own countries. It seems to me that the only fair thing to do would be to have a continent-wide referendum as to whether the Europeans wish to be a minority in Europe. Then you have a clear mandate either way. But for some reason, I think our political and economic elite would never give us such a referendum, probably because they won't get the answer that they want. These are just my thoughts, however. Do let me know what you think down below, and do consider subscribing to the channel.